Well, Sparky?
Yeah.
How are you?
Good.
That's good.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
How are you?
Good.
That's good.
Well, thanks a lot. Bye.
From turkeys falling from the sky to a show title that secretly means crap, WKRP in Cincinnati packed more bizarre behind-the-scenes stories into 4 seasons than most sitcoms manage in a lifetime. Between gibberish theme songs, invisible office walls, and doorbells that play Frank Sinatra classics, this struggling radio station comedy became legendary for reasons far beyond its ratings. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about WKRP in Cincinnati. Fact 1. The show's name is a bathroom joke.
Running this station is a 24-hour-a-day job. What do you think I do around here? Sleep?
Yes, I do.
Damn right I sleep.
When Hugh Wilson was developing his sitcom about a struggling radio station in the late 1970s, he needed to come up with call letters that would sound authentic, but also carry a hidden meaning. What he settled on was more than a little crude. In an interview with the Cincinnati Enquirer, Wilson openly admitted that he deliberately chose the call letters WKRP to stand for the word crap. It wasn't a coincidence or a happy accident, it was completely intentional from the very beginning. The choice of Cincinnati as the show's setting was equally calculated. Wilson explained that he picked the city specifically because it paired well with his bathroom humor joke. The name had the right rhythm and sound when you said WKRP in Cincinnati out loud, and apparently nobody at the network caught on to what the call letters really meant, at least not at first. What makes this even more interesting is that CBS lawyers initially had concerns about the call letters for a completely different reason. They worried that WKRP was too similar to the real Cincinnati radio station WKRC, and they were afraid of potential legal issues. Wilson actually had to call the real station and ask for their permission to use the similar-sounding call letters. The people at WKRC were thrilled rather than upset because they saw it as free publicity for their actual station, so they happily gave their blessing. So while the network was busy worrying about trademark issues, they completely missed the fact that the show's creator had named his fictional radio station after excrement. Wilson managed to sneak his juvenile joke past the censors and executives, and it stayed hidden in plain sight for the show's entire 4-season run. Fact 2. The turkey drop really happened.
Now, the main thing is we've got to keep as low a profile as possible on this. Don't say anything, and certainly don't say a word about it on the air.
This is Les Nessman with a special news flash.
That's right.
Garbage holocaust brings city to its knees.
The most famous episode of WKRP in Cincinnati is called Turkeys Away, and it features one of the most memorable disasters in sitcom history. Live turkeys being dropped from a helicopter as a Thanksgiving promotion with predictably catastrophic results. What most viewers don't realize is that this absurd scenario was actually based on a real radio station promotion that went horribly wrong. Creator Hugh Wilson based the episode on a story told to him by Jerry Blum, who had been a general manager at various radio stations throughout his career. The actual incident happened at K-Box Radio in Dallas, Texas, back in the early 1960s, though some accounts suggest it may have occurred at a different station. According to Blum's son Gary, the promotion involved throwing frozen turkeys out of the back of a moving pickup truck at a shopping center parking lot rather than from a helicopter. The public went absolutely nuts fighting over the turkeys, and the whole thing turned into a complete mess. What makes this story even more remarkable is that Jerry Blum reportedly said almost the exact same words that became the episode's most iconic line. After witnessing the chaos of the failed promotion, Blum apparently said, "I didn't know turkeys couldn't fly," which Hugh Wilson later transformed into Arthur Carlson's unforgettable declaration, "As God is my witness, I thought turkeys could fly." Wilson took Blum's real-life disaster and amplified it for television by changing the delivery method from a truck to a helicopter and adding the dramatic on-scene reporting by Les Nessman. The episode aired on October 30th, 1978, and has since been recognized as one of the greatest television episodes of all time, proving that sometimes the best comedy comes straight from reality. Fact 3. Les Nessman's invisible office walls.
One thing is clear. This dark Wednesday will live in infamy.
It's Thursday, Les.
Thursday.
One of the most absurd running gags in WKRP in Cincinnati involved news director Les Nessman and his desperate need for privacy in the open office space. Les felt that he deserved his own private office, but since the station didn't have one to give him, he came up with his own creative solution. He put masking tape on the floor around his desk to mark out the boundaries of what he considered to be his personal office space, complete with invisible walls and an invisible door. What made this visual gag even funnier was that the other characters on the show actually went along with it and treated Les's imaginary office as if it were real. When they needed to speak with him, they would stop at the tape line on the floor, pause to turn an invisible doorknob, and then step through the pretend doorway before approaching his desk. In some scenes, characters would even lean against the non-existent doorframe while talking to Les, holding on to thin air as if there were actually something solid there to support them. This brilliant piece of physical comedy became one of the show's most memorable quirks, perfectly capturing Les Nessman's delusional sense of self-importance and the patience his coworkers had to have in dealing with his eccentric behavior. The invisible office represented everything about Les's character. He was simultaneously pathetic and endearing, completely out of touch with reality, but somehow making it work anyway. The taped floor lines appeared throughout the series, serving as a constant visual reminder that Les lived in his own little world where he commanded the respect and private workspace that the actual radio station would never provide. It was a simple prop that required nothing more than some masking tape, yet it became one of the show's most iconic and frequently referenced elements. Fact 4. The creator hated his highest-rated episode.
No, I'm sorry. Mr. Carlson can't be disturbed. He's reevaluating his priorities.
Hugh Wilson found himself in an impossible position during the first season of WKRP in Cincinnati, when CBS executives kept demanding that he make the show funnier and more farcical. The network wanted broader physical comedy and sillier storylines, which went against everything Wilson was trying to achieve with the show's more realistic approach to workplace humor. Finally, feeling pressured and thinking the show was probably going to be canceled anyway, Wilson decided to give the network exactly what they were asking for. He wrote an episode called Fish Story that was deliberately over the top, filled with ridiculous costumes, absurd situations, and the kind of broad comedy he personally despised. The episode featured Herb Tarlek, dressed in a giant carp costume as the station's new mascot, Johnny Fever, and Venus doing an on-air drinking test where Johnny's reflexes mysteriously improved with each drink, and various other silly scenarios happening all at once. Wilson was so embarrassed by what he had written that he refused to put his real name on it, and instead used the pseudonym Raoul Plager in the writing credits. The irony of the situation became painfully clear when Fish Story aired on May 28, 1979. Not only did it become one of the most beloved episodes among fans, but it also pulled in the highest ratings of the entire series run. Wilson later had an awkward moment when he visited his father at Harvard Law School, and some law students told him they had just watched the funniest episode of television they had ever seen. When Wilson admitted he wrote it, the students got angry and insisted he was lying because the credits clearly said it was written by Raoul Plager, not Hugh Wilson. Fact 5. Jennifer's doorbell played a classic song.
John,
Yes, Lord. What is it?
you advertising copy?
The character of Jennifer Marlowe was the glamorous receptionist at WKRP who lived a life of luxury thanks to her wealthy older boyfriends, and the show's creators added clever little touches throughout the series to emphasize her sophisticated lifestyle. One of these details was the custom doorbell at her penthouse apartment, which didn't make the standard ding-dong sound that most doorbells produced. Instead, whenever someone rang Jennifer's doorbell, it played the opening musical bars of the classic song "Fly Me to the Moon" in elegant, dignified tones. This small detail was part of the show's commitment to using music as a storytelling device, and the doorbell became one of those little Easter eggs that observant viewers noticed and appreciated. The choice of "Fly Me to the Moon" was perfect for Jennifer's character because it suggested class, romance, and the kind of old-school elegance that matched her carefully crafted image as someone who moved in elite social circles despite working at a struggling radio station. However, this charming detail ended up causing problems years later when the show went into syndication. The music, licensing deals that had been negotiated during the original production run eventually expired, and the cost of renewing the rights to use "Fly Me to the Moon" for Jennifer's doorbell became prohibitive. Rather than pay the ongoing royalties for those few musical notes, the producers made the decision to replace the doorbell chime with a different song called "Beautiful Dreamer" in all the syndicated versions of the show. This change meant that anyone watching WKRP reruns from the 1990s onward heard a completely different doorbell than what original viewers experienced, making Jennifer's doorbell yet another casualty of the show's complicated music licensing issues. Fact 6. Blondie gave the show a gold record.
3 pie? Do these lead upstairs?
Depends on which way you're going.
WKRP in Cincinnati was famous for featuring real hit songs as part of its storylines, and the show had a genuine impact on the music industry during its original run. One of the most notable examples of this happened with the band Blondie and their disco-influenced song "Heart of Glass," which appeared in a first-season episode called "Commercial Break" that aired in March of 1979. During the episode, DJ Johnny Fever played "Heart of Glass" on the air, and this happened just weeks before the Recording Industry Association of America officially certified the song as gold and the album Parallel Lines as platinum. The exposure that WKRP gave to the song is widely credited with helping push it to become a major hit in the United States. And Blondie's record label Chrysalis Records recognized the show's contribution to the song's success. As a gesture of gratitude, Chrysalis Records presented the show's producers with an official Gold Record Award for the Parallel Lines album. This wasn't just a prop or a replica. It was an authentic Recording Industry Association of America Gold record plaque, the same kind that recording artists receive when their albums reach certain sales milestones. The producers were so proud of this acknowledgement that they incorporated the gold record into the show itself as a permanent piece of set decoration. Starting in the second season and continuing through the rest of the series, viewers could spot the Blondie gold record hanging on the wall in the bullpen area where the staff gathered. It became a subtle Easter egg for observant fans and served as a real-world reminder that the fictional radio station WKRP actually had the power to influence music charts and break new artists, just like real radio stations did. Fact 7. The closing theme has no real lyrics.
I would just like to say right here at the outset that if any of you people are in here just because I'm the boss, then I think you should leave. I just personally would like to...
If you ever tried to figure out what the singer was saying during the closing credits of WKRP in Cincinnati, you weren't alone, and there's a very good reason why nobody could understand the words. The truth is that there were never any actual lyrics to begin with, just complete gibberish that was never meant to make it into the final version of the show. Jim Ellis was the musician who composed and performed the end credits, theme song, and when he went into the studio to record it, he hadn't yet written any lyrics to go along with the melody. He originally intended for the closing theme to be purely instrumental, But on the day of recording, he started joking around and singing along to the saxophone melody he had created. Since there were no real words written down, Ellis just mumbled nonsense syllables and made up sounds as he went along, essentially scatting his way through what was supposed to be a temporary demo version. When Hugh Wilson and composer Tom Wells heard the recording with Ellis's meaningless vocalizations, they thought it was absolutely hilarious. Wilson saw it as the perfect satirical commentary on how so many rock and roll songs of that era had lyrics that were completely unintelligible to listeners, either because of poor audio quality, mumbled delivery, or intentionally obscure wordplay. They decided that this accidental joke was too good to pass up, so they kept the gibberish version as the official closing theme. The nonsense lyrics remained in place for the entire 4-season run of the show, and most viewers probably never realized that what they were hearing wasn't actually words at all, just random sounds that happened to fit the rhythm of the music perfectly. Fact 8. A Mormon played a heavy drinker. Gordon Jump brought the character of Arthur Carlson to life as the bumbling, often overwhelmed station manager of WKRP, and one of the recurring elements of his character was his tendency to drink alcohol fairly frequently throughout the series. Arthur Carlson could be seen having drinks during the work hours, getting drunk at office parties, and generally using alcohol as a way to cope with the stress of running a failing radio station. What makes this casting choice particularly interesting is that Gordon Jump himself was a devout member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, commonly known as the Mormon Church, which has strict prohibitions against consuming alcohol. Jump had converted to the Mormon faith earlier in his life and took his religious commitments very seriously. He was an elder in the church, taught Sunday school classes, and performed various ministerial duties within his congregation. The health codes of his faith were extremely important to him, and he followed them faithfully throughout his entire career in Hollywood, which is no small feat given the drinking culture that often surrounded the entertainment industry. His commitment to his religious principles even extended to the types of work he would accept outside of WKRP. Jump was approached multiple times to appear in beer commercials, which would have been lucrative opportunities for any working actor, but he consistently turned them down because he didn't want to promote alcohol consumption. This decision was made easier thanks to advice from Ruth Hale, a theater director who had been instrumental in Jump's early acting career, and who had also helped convince him to quit smoking years earlier. So every time viewers saw Arthur Carlson pouring himself a drink on screen, they were watching a teetotaler actor who had never touched alcohol in his personal life. Fact 9. Bailey was discovered on a Newsweek cover.
Where's the Coke? I don't know. I guess Carlson puts it on his feet.
Jan Smithers became a household name in the late 1970s, playing Bailey Quarters, the shy but intelligent reporter on WKRP in Cincinnati. But her path to stardom began in the most unexpected way more than a decade earlier. In 1966, when Smithers was just 16 years old and still a typical Valley girl living in Southern California, she went to the beach one day to watch a friend go surfing, never imagining that this casual outing would completely change the course of her life. While she was sitting there watching her friend ride the waves, two men carrying cameras approached her and explained that they worked for Newsweek magazine. They were looking for a quintessential California teenager to photograph for an upcoming cover story, and they thought Jan fit exactly what they were looking for. She agreed to let them take her picture, and photographer Julian Wasser captured her sitting on the back of a motorcycle with a carefree, sun-kissed smile that perfectly embodied the spirit of teenage life in the 1960s. That single photograph ended up on the cover of the March 21st, 1966 issue of Newsweek, which featured a major article titled "The Teenagers, a Newsweek Survey of What They're Really Like." The story profiled 6 teenagers from across the country in depth, and Jan was one of them. The cover exposure led to her receiving calls from many Hollywood agents who wanted to represent her, and her mother helped her navigate the sudden interest from the entertainment industry. Jan later reflected on how this random encounter at the beach took away her chance to imagine how her life might unfold, saying that because of Newsweek magazine, she didn't have the opportunity to plan her own future because it had already been decided for her. Fact 10. It was videotaped to save music money.
Can't even get a comfortable chair in one of those places. Of course, yeah, I could be wrong because oftentimes I really don't know what I'm talking about.
Most sitcoms in the late 1970s were shot on film, which was considered the standard professional format for television production and generally produced a higher quality visual result. However, WKRP in Cincinnati made the unusual decision to shoot on videotape instead, and this choice had nothing to do with visual aesthetics or production preferences. It was entirely about finding a way to afford the music that was so essential to the show's identity. The producers discovered a loophole in the music licensing system that existed at the time. Music licensing fees for using popular songs on television were calculated differently depending on whether a show was filmed or videotaped, and videotape programs paid significantly lower royalty rates. This pricing structure had been designed with variety shows in mind, since those programs typically featured live musical performances and were usually shot on videotape for technical reasons, but there was nothing stopping a scripted sitcom from taking advantage of the same reduced rates. Since WKRP was set at a rock and roll radio station and the creators wanted to feature real hit songs as an integral part of the storytelling, the cost of music licensing was going to be substantial no matter what format they chose. By shooting on videotape instead of film, they could secure the rights to use popular music from artists like Blondie, The Cars, and many others at a fraction of what it would have cost if the show had been filmed traditionally. This clever exploitation of the licensing loophole allowed WKRP to create a more authentic atmosphere and help launch the careers of up-and-coming musicians. But it also created massive problems decades later when those original licensing deals expired and the show had to replace most of its music for syndication. Fact 11. The Who tragedy episode aired 70 days later. On December 3, 1979, a devastating tragedy occurred at Riverfront Coliseum in Cincinnati when 11 people died in a crowd crush before a concert by the rock band The Who. The incident happened because the venue used festival seating, which meant thousands of fans rushed toward the limited number of open doors to get the best spots, resulting in people being trampled and crushed to death. This real-life disaster happened in the very city where WKRP in Cincinnati was set, and it involved the exact kind of rock concert that the fictional radio station would have been promoting. Hugh Wilson and his writing staff felt compelled to address the tragedy on their show, even though CBS executives were horrified by the idea of a comedy program tackling such a sensitive and recent event. Wilson initially resisted the idea himself, but the writers convinced him that since the show was based in Cincinnati and centered around rock and roll music, they had a responsibility to say something about what had happened. The episode they created, titled In Concert, aired on February 11, 1980, just 70 days after the actual tragedy occurred. Robert Gordon, the vice president of WCPO, which was Cincinnati's local CBS affiliate station, initially stated that the episode would absolutely not be broadcast in Cincinnati because he felt it was exploiting a horrific event. However, after the network allowed him to view the finished episode before it aired nationally, Gordon changed his position completely. He acknowledged that the tragedy had been handled tastefully and sensitively, and he agreed to let Cincinnati viewers see it after all. The episode became one of the most powerful and memorable moments in the entire series. Fact 12. Les Nessman's bandages started from a real injury. One of the most subtle running gags in WKRP in Cincinnati was that Les Nessman always had a bandage somewhere on his body, and the location of the ideal bandage changed from episode to episode without any explanation ever being offered. What most viewers didn't realize was that this quirky visual element of the character came about entirely by accident during the filming of the very first episode. While they were taping the pilot, Richard Sanders accidentally bumped his head on one of the studio lights, and the impact was hard enough that it left a cut that needed to be covered up. The production team put a bandage on Sanders so he could continue filming, and originally the plan was to write some dialogue explaining why Les had injured himself. However, those explanatory lines ended up being cut from the final edit of the pilot, which meant Les Nessman appeared on screen with a bandage that was never mentioned or discussed by any of the characters. Rather than letting this be a one-time continuity error, Sanders decided to turn the unexplained bandage into a deliberate character choice. He suggested that Les should wear a different bandage in a new location every single episode, creating a visual mystery that would never be solved. The producers liked the idea and ran with it, and they eventually came up with a backstory to justify it for anyone who was curious enough to ask. According to the show's internal logic, Les owned a large and vicious dog named Phil, who was never seen on camera but could occasionally be heard growling in another room during scenes set in Les's apartment. The implication was that Phil regularly attacked Les, which explained the constant injuries requiring fresh bandages in rotating locations throughout the series. Fact 13. CBS lawyers almost killed the show name.
Johnny, my space has been violated.
Congratulations, it's about time.
When Hugh Wilson submitted his concept for WKRP in Cincinnati to CBS, he ran into an unexpected legal problem that nearly derailed the entire project before it even got started. The network's lawyers took one look at the call letters WKRP and immediately raised concerns because there was already a real radio station in Cincinnati that used very similar call letters, WKRC. The legal team was worried about potential trademark infringement and the possibility of a lawsuit from the actual radio station, so they vetoed Wilson's choice and told him he would need to come up with different call letters for his fictional station. Wilson was determined to keep the WKRP call sign because it was essential to his crude joke about the show's title, so he decided to take matters into his own hands and solve the problem directly. He picked up the phone and called the real WKRC radio station in Cincinnati to ask them personally if they would have any objections to his show using the similar-sounding call letters. In a conversation he later recounted to the Television Academy Foundation in 2015, Wilson explained what happened when he made that call. The response from WKRC was the complete opposite of what the CBS lawyers had feared. Instead of threatening legal action or expressing concern about confusion between the real station and the fictional one, the people at WKRC were absolutely delighted by the idea. They saw it as a fantastic publicity opportunity for their actual radio station and told Wilson they thought it was wonderful. They gave him their full permission and blessing to use the WKRP call letters, and the legal issue disappeared as quickly as it had appeared, allowing the show to move forward with its intended name intact. Fact 14. The show was canceled, then rescued by radio DJs. WKRP in Cincinnati did not have an easy start when it premiered in September of 1978. The show was placed in a brutally competitive time slot on Monday nights at 8 o'clock, where it had to go up against powerhouse programs like Little House on the Prairie and Welcome Back, Kotter. Despite receiving strong reviews from critics who recognized the quality of the writing and performances, the ratings were disappointing, and CBS quickly lost confidence in the show's ability to find an audience. After broadcasting only 8 episodes, the network made the decision to pull WKRP from the schedule and put it on what they called a hiatus. In the television industry, a hiatus announcement is often just a polite way of saying a show has been canceled, and most industry observers at the time assumed that WKRP was finished and would never return to the air. The network still had 5 completed episodes that hadn't been broadcast yet, and it seemed likely that those episodes would never be seen by audiences. However, something unexpected happened during the show's absence from the schedule. Real radio disc jockeys across the country had fallen in love with WKRP because it portrayed their profession with an accuracy and authenticity that was rarely seen on television. These DJs started talking about the show on the air, expressing their disappointment about its cancellation, and encouraging their listeners to contact CBS and demand that it be brought back. This grassroots campaign from the radio industry, combined with positive buzz about certain episodes, convinced CBS to give the show a second chance. In January of 1979, WKRP returned to the air in a much better time slot, airing right after the massively popular series MASH, which gave it the boost it needed to succeed. Fact 15. Howard Hesseman originally auditioned for Herb.
This Soviet piggy had turkey, and our American piggy had none. This is Les Nessman saying wee, 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 wee all the way home.
Howard Hesseman became inseparable from the role of Dr. Johnny Fever, the laid-back, slightly burned-out disc jockey who was one of the most beloved characters on WKRP in Cincinnati. However, when Hesseman first got the call to audition for the show, the producers had a completely different role in mind for him. They wanted him to read for the part of Herb Tarlick, the sleazy, polyester-suited advertising sales manager who was known for his tasteless plaid jackets and his unsuccessful attempts to hit on receptionist Jennifer Marlowe. Hesseman showed up for his audition and was given the script to look over before reading for the Herb Tarlick role. As he read through the material, he realized that while Herb was certainly a funny character, there was another role in the script that he felt much more connected to, the character of Dr. Johnny Fever. Hesseman had actually worked as a radio disc jockey at a station in San Francisco before becoming an actor, so he had real first-hand experience with the world of radio broadcasting and understood exactly who Johnny Fever was supposed to be. Rather than simply reading for the part he had been asked to audition for, Hesseman made a bold decision. He told the producers that he didn't want to read for Herb Tarlick at all, and insisted that they let him audition for the role of Johnny Fever instead. This kind of demand could have easily backfired and cost him any chance at being cast in the show, but the producers agreed to let him read for Johnny, and his audition was so perfect that he won the role on the spot. Frank Bonner ended up playing Herb Tarlick, and it's hard to imagine the show working any other way.